You know, when you like sit down to read a really good book and you're concentrating on the book, right? You're concentrating on the story, but everything else kind of goes away. And you're in this like really, you're quiet and it's just you in this book and you're like in that flow. Calligraphy can be like that a lot. It feels like a very similar part of mine.
No rain.
Hello folks, welcome to the Naren Agarwal Show. Today's show is going to be one that I am really intrigued about because we're speaking to a hand letterer and a calligrapher. I mean, if you look at her page, she is awesome. I love how she combines art and calligraphy with words. It's truly unique. And I was so curious to have my friend, Miss Cortlan Waters Bartley, to come on live and speak with us. So welcome, Cortlan. How are you doing?
Hi, Naren. I'm good. It's good to be here. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Thanks for doing this. I know even though the time difference, we made it work. So thanks so much for that. Cortlan, firstly, what does it mean to be a hand letterer? Hand letterer. I know it's a mouthful, so I'm using it up.
Sorry. Okay, so there are lots of definitions, but usually I think about it as a hand letterer is someone who draws letters. So usually your handwriting is different from hand lettering. So hand lettering is the art of drawing letters. And that's kind of how I think about it.
Correct.
Differently from just like my normal handwriting doesn't look like what you see on my Instagram.
I was wondering if you're just blessed with great handwriting.
No, not at all. No.
My handwriting is so poor, Cortlan. My parents used to always say when I was a child that this guy can be a doctor just because of my poor handwriting. You know, doctors have typically a poor handwriting here in India, at least. So,
yeah.
Drawing letters, that's so interesting. So what is calligraphy then?
So calligraphy is its own art. So they're separate from each other. Calligraphy has very specific elements to it. So a calligraphy is really marked by a strong difference between the downstroke and the upstroke. So a thick downstroke and a light upstroke. And you make calligraphy by applying pressure with your hand. Whereas with hand lettering, you're just drawing, with a pencil or a marker, or whatever you want to use. So they're similar, but you make them in very particular ways, if that makes sense.
I see. So calligraphy is almost like a different language in the art of making letters on the page.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So Cortlan, tell us a little bit about how you got into this. I mean, this is a very unique niche to have and a talent to have. What brought you into it? Why did you get fascinated by it?
Well, it kind of started on accident, actually. But I went through this time in my life where a lot of my friends were giving me for like my birthday or for Christmas or whatever. They were giving me those coloring books, the really intricate like adult coloring books with like the really little tiny designs and all, and those coloring books, right, are meant to help you relax. You're supposed to just, you're gonna chill with your coloring. And I used them, I colored some of them, but it was not doing that for me. It just wasn't. I don't know. I was like, this is fun, but it is not like turning off my brain in any way. And I just happened to be looking for markers to use in the coloring book. And I came across a set of brush markers, brush pen markers. And so I bought them. It was like a, $8 pack of super, like for kids almost, like brush markers. Okay. And after I bought them, I realized what they were for, or what you can use brush markers for. One of the things is calligraphy, is brush calligraphy. Okay. And so I just tried it like one random day and went from there. And it spiraled very quickly from there into tutorials and like classes and how can I get better? How can I learn more about how to do this better? I own a lot of brush pens now. Since those first like 6, I have I don't even know, 100. I have 100 brush markers probably. So it was kind of an accident.
How long back was this?
Hmm?
How long back was this?
Oh, a little more than 3 years, I think. I think I picked those up about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Give or take a little bit,
Yeah.
somewhere in that time range. So yeah, it was kind of an accident. And then after that, I started watching. There are lots and lots of lessons. The internet is a big and amazing place. And then I started taking some courses, online courses, and
Wow.
just kept going. Just kept
Were
going from there.
these paid courses, or were these
Some
like
of them, yeah, some of them were, some of them weren't. I started with free ones because I wasn't sure
correct?
how much am I going to love doing this, and then when I realized, no, I really do love doing it, I decided it was a good idea to invest in some more intense classes. And usually that's when you start, paying for them.
Yeah, correct.
So,
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah.
How do you see it different than painting? Because it's words here, so it's art, but then it's different than painting art. How do you differentiate it in your head? And have you also gotten better at painting while doing this? Has that happened?
How is it different from, I don't know that it is that different from painting. It's just a difference in the way you are conveying the message. I think a painter is going to convey a message with imagery, and my imagery just happens to be words. So it's just a different way, I think, of conveying the message. And honestly, I am not good at drawing images at all. I can do some really basic kinds of paint, and if you scroll through my Instagram page, you'll see there are some things, I can do some things. I'm really bad at drawing people. Can't do that. Can't do it. But I think, it's just a different way of putting the message out on the page. So yeah, I mean, certainly drawing letters has helped me draw other things, but letters are pretty unique forms. So they're made of, pretty consistent shapes.
I have been seeing this. This is kind of becoming a bigger thing now. Back in the day, like at least when I was growing up, maybe I was oblivious to it, but hand lettering was not so big. I think calligraphy was there, but beautifying words and phrases and quotes. But now I see almost every college kid in their dorm has some lettering and some phrasing out there. Why do you think that's growing? Like, what's your perspective?
Well, I think there are lots of answers to that question. I mean, calligraphy has been around for a long time. I mean, there are many cultures around the world that have been doing calligraphy for, ever. For as long as there have been the written word, there's been some kind of calligraphy. Like, especially I'm thinking of in Asia, like in China and Japan, where they have very ritualized, and I'm not an expert on any of that. But it's been around a long time, this like art of making words. But I think now, I think sometimes people are just looking for that. Like, I think when you find a message that you really care about, you want to have it with you, and you want it to reflect that importance to you. Is it important? If it's important enough to you, I think sometimes you want the image to reflect that. You want the words to reflect that. So I think that is probably why so many, you see it everywhere now. But I think too, some of it is a little bit commercial, in that, like, if you're going to advertise whatever, you're going to create and advertise for whatever, you're either going to pay for a license for an existing font or artwork or whatever, or you're going to pay an artist to make you your own. And so it just depends on what you want. And so I think hand letterers in particular now often are hired because it's better or easier to hire an artist to make you an image that then you own forever, as opposed to paying licensing fees for, X number of fonts or whatever it is. So I think that's twofold kind of answer.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome perspective. So another question would be like, different fonts. It's funny how different fonts give us different brain signals. Like if somebody's writing a formal letter, they might as well go for Times New Roman, which is a cool font. But if you go for Comics Sans, then that's really funny, right? You don't do that on a formal letter. But why so? Like, why is it that different fonts give us different brain wiring? How does that work? And how do you explain it?
Yeah, I think some of it is just your personal preference, right? But I mean, some of it is certainly, Times New Roman, we all know, is the professional. Like, you're just not going to use Comic Sans in your cover letter. Because, I mean, I guess you could. It would certainly deliver
It'd make you stand out for sure. Yeah.
Right? They would know. They would remember you. That's for sure. If you sent in your cover letter with Comic Sans. But that's what I really like about drawing my own letters is I get to decide what it looks like. I get to decide, is it fun or is it formal? Is it square or is it not square? And you get to play with that if you're going to draw your own fonts. And then, like I said, especially fonts like Times New Roman that are universal, that you're going to get, it would be very difficult to change the perception of Times New Roman.
Yeah. So what's like this? Is there like certain type of psychology behind writing fonts or sharp edges around fonts or making them circular? Like, does it deliver a certain type of message? What's kind of like the science behind fonts?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in that for sure, but I do know, for me, I hard edges and soft edges have meaning in anything. So I like to play with when I do it. I'm thinking specifically, I did I did a mini letter. It's like on a business card sized thing, and it says thick and thin. And what I did was I made the word thick out of really heavy, thick letters, and I did the opposite for thin because, you can make those reflect each other. Or I could have reversed them. As well, and like playing with that to deliver the messages. You just have to keep going until you know when it's right, or until you feel like it's right. And so I don't know. I'm sure there is a lot of science about how we perceive those things. For me, I just kind of go until it seems right. And that's a really hard spot to find sometimes.
I mean, that's what makes it an art, right? That the fact that you have that sensitivity and there's no particular thing, it just makes it feel right.
Yeah.
And you do it. Wow. I remember seeing this post that I really loved from you. It said struggle bus. And the way you had written the letters, it was looking like a bus. So anybody could see that it is a bus.
Yeah.
The words were struggle bus. I mean, the thick and thin thing that you said. How do you come up with these ideas? Like, are these like ideas that come in the shower? Do you have a ritual around? How do you come up with these innovative ideas?
Yeah, well, sometimes ideas in the shower. I definitely look at, now that I've been doing hand lettering for 3 years, I see it everywhere. So definitely look for those things everywhere. Look for different styles or different ways that people have, distorted the letters. So struggle bus is a really good example, where you make your words fill the shape. And people do that for all kinds of, it could be anything. You can make them fill any shape if you try hard enough. And so that I just decided, I'm going to make a bus today. So, it was just a matter of altering the letters enough that they fill the shape, but without making it hard to read. And that, for that one in particular, that's where the balance is. The number one rule of hand lettering is that you have to be able to read it, or it's not a word anymore. Yeah. So, finding that. I love the struggle bus. That one was just a random brainwave. I was playing, we were doing, we were in lockdown, we were in coronavirus lockdown, and we were playing trivia online, and somebody said something about the struggle bus, and I was like, I'm gonna draw a bus today. So I just started sketching it, like while we were playing trivia, and yeah, that one went through several iterations, but it is a good one.
Sorry, Cortlan, when you said that you had the coloring book, it was not necessarily therapeutic for you, right?
Yeah.
It was very intricate. But is this what you do, hand lettering and calligraphy, is this therapeutic in some nature, or is it just that you enjoy doing it because of the creativity out of it?
Yeah, I think, well, I do enjoy doing it for the creativity, but I think especially calligraphy in particular can be very therapeutic because it requires very specific kinds of concentration. So I explained it to someone once, when you like sit down to read a really good book and you're concentrating on the book, right? You're concentrating on the story, but everything else kind of goes away, and you're in this like really, you're quiet, and it's just you in this book, and you're like in that flow. Calligraphy can be like that a lot. It feels like a very similar part of my brain is like working when I do, because it is a very specific like rhythm of like up and down, and like the pressure and the release, and like, there's a really specific flow to that I think activates that kind of part of my brain where just everything else goes away because this is what's in front of me, so it can be very, very therapeutic.
Wow, that's such a cool perspective, Cortlan, because I think a lot of us think therapeutic or a massage means that you don't think about anything and you just like there's no concentration. That's what our general idea of like being therapeutic is. Like you can just let loose and not worry about anything. But I really love how you talk about it's not about none, but it's about many to one.
Yeah.
Almost like it's like filtering the concentration in a way that it's in a flow rather than very haphazard. That's such a cool example. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and I know from just knowing you, like you do meditate, you practice meditation, and that, I've tried various meditation sort of things, and I really struggle to do that, the way I think I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
But with
I do too. But anyways.
but like with calligraphy, it is almost meditative in that everything is just this like one rhythm of like writing that word. And so that works for me. And there are lots of art therapists out there in the world who could probably explain that. And I actually did, I listened to an interview with an art therapist who was talking about writing. And she did this exercise because there was a professional calligrapher was interviewing her. And we did this exercise of like breathe in, breathe out, and move your pen as you go. And it was really fascinating. And I think that there are lots of places where those things overlap.
What a cool perspective.
Yeah.
Calligraphy. I want to talk a little bit about calligraphy. I've always heard like the Chinese calligraphy is very fascinating. And the first time I saw calligraphy, I was like, wow, this is awesome. What different kinds of calligraphy are there according to you? And like, is there a certain style that you practice more than the other?
Yeah. So there are so many, people sometimes it varies like person to person, your individual, style. But for me, I make calligraphy in a couple different ways. So one, I use a brush, like a paintbrush or a brush marker, anything that is flexible enough to give you the variety, the thick and thin kinds of lines. But then also, there's probably the more traditional, when you think of calligraphy, you're probably thinking of like a pointed pen. So like it's like a metal, very sharp looking pen that you dip in the ink. Yeah, appointment. Yes, exactly. And I do that as well. So that is, I think, much harder. It is much harder to learn, much harder to perfect, just because it's very, it's very small. And ink is, ink flow and all those things. But, there are lots of styles out there. The most recent one that I took a class on most recently, just before all the kind of lockdown stuff happened, actually, was really old school copperplate calligraphy, which is more like, if you think about like old documents, like the Declaration of Independence, or old kind of like old timey written out. That's more like what copperplate is. Very difficult, very difficult to do well, but really interesting and fun to learn, definitely.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I don't think I have any talent in good handwriting whatsoever. So it's even more fascinating for me to learn about this. Now, for somebody who,
Like, but people say that all the time, that like, oh, my handwriting is terrible, so I could never do that. But it's just a matter of thinking about it differently. So I've taught people before. I've done little like mini classes with people before, and it's really important that when you sit down to learn it, you don't think, I'm going to write this word. You're not. You're going to draw these letters, and
wow,
it will help you kind of change the shape enough, because you're not going to write the word, you're going to draw the letters. And it's because if you start thinking about it as writing the word, then it's going to look like your handwriting, and it's not going to be what you want. It's not going to be what you
correct. Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Not writing the words, but drawing the letters.
Yeah.
Wow. So you used words here to also alter the perspective of how people write words.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Who's been your inspiration when it comes to like, hand lettering and calligraphy? Are there some that inspired you, some artists that inspired you?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of really, really talented hand letterers out in the world. And if I would encourage anyone who's interested in that, you should look at the hashtags on Instagram. You'll see there are amazing, amazing people out there. The first person, so one person, she's actually a teacher. She teaches online classes. She's Canadian. Her name is Becca Cortese, and she teaches brush lettering in particular. But she is amazing. She's amazing. She basically turned, and she's now she's mostly a teacher. She does all kinds of hand lettering work, and like on windows and, all kinds of cool stuff where she lives. But she also basically leads this huge community of people who are learning hand lettering. And it's incredible. She's amazing. So her for sure, Becca for sure. And Becca is also the person that if you were looking to learn, I would send you to Becca, because she's great. But then also my other sort of favorite hand letterer out there, his name is Stefan Kuntz. He is in Switzerland, but he has traveled all over the world, and he's done hand lettering projects, all over the world. So, and they're very different from one another. Becca is a calligrapher, and Stefan is a hand letterer. So they're pretty distinct from one another, but equally talented at what they do. And yeah, so those would be the two that I would name probably most frequently if you were asking me about it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Now that you have this talent, does it make your life easier to not spend money on buying cards from Hallmark or other places? Do you end up spending a lot of money with this?
Yeah, well, I would say there's an important trade-off there. That's true. I have what we might call ready-made gifts, right? I can make a gift for any occasion, a really specific occasion even, because I make it myself. But anyone, depending on what you want to make, calligraphy can be a very expensive hobby to pick up. It just, I mean, it doesn't have to be. You can make calligraphy with a pencil or a pen, you know, just like a regular ink pen. But once you start branching out, you know, the pens and the paper and the ink and all of those things can really, if you're not careful, or if you're like me and just like to shop for craft supplies, it can start adding up a lot.
Right? You just go deeper and deeper, and this pen and that pen.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I purchased like a generic 6-pack of brush pens the first time, and I have purchased a lot more since then, a lot more. So, you know, it depends, I guess, on your personal willpower. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it's really cool, and you might want to buy it all.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, yeah, so many pens.
Cortlan, do you have any like sample stuff that you want to show us, especially for our viewers on YouTube?
Yeah, I have some things. I didn't know. I have a lot of things because I practice a lot. You know, it's something that you only get better at by practicing a lot. So I have made just a lot of stuff. I mean, you can see my Instagram page. I don't post everything that I make on my Instagram page. But this is my favorite thing that I've made recently. And it's a quote that I found. I found this quote on Pinterest, I think. But I started doing research about the person that wrote it, the actual writer. And he is also on Instagram. He's like a poet. He does poetry or whatever. But anyway, so this is, I don't know. I hope it's not backwards.
No, it's not.
Okay, great. It says, "The day will be what you make it. So rise like the sun and burn." And I loved it the first time I saw it on Pinterest. And then I just started thinking about like, how would I draw this if I were gonna, you know, letter it myself? And I just sort of started imagining it like a sunrise, basically, and trying to fit the letters in that way.
That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Like, I think this sort of art like appeals to everybody, even if somebody is not so much into like paintings, but like words infused with art. I think this is somebody that's like everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah, it's so much. I mean, you know, and now I'm looking at this, of course, and thinking, well, like, how can I improve this now? But you know, and that's just how, you know, after a while, that's how it works. But this was just one of my favorites that I made more recently.
So innovative, so creative.
Thank you. I love using gold and black together. I land on that combination all the time. So that's just one. Let me think. Let me find another one. This is another one that I just made just a couple weeks ago, I think. That is a little more fun. It's still in my sketchbook, you can see. And it says, "Cool as a cucumber."
And in the cool, you have 2 cucumbers on.
Yes, I know it's probably hard to see in your video, but yeah, cool. I made cucumber slices there. That's about the extent of my like drawing capability is making the cucumber slices. But you know, it's fun to play with. Say, you know, that's like an idiom. It's just a fun kind of saying that automatically lends itself to how I'm going to make these letters look. Because I can make them look like cucumbers, or color them like cucumbers or whatever. So that's, you know, sometimes it's just stuff like that that's like, how can I make this fun to look at? This thing that we know, cool as a cucumber.
Wow.
So that was just a fun one.
One last one that you want to share with us? Do you have another one?
Yeah. This one, so it's a little different, but kind of like what we were talking about with the struggle bus, where you fit the letters into a shape, right? So this is rectangular, but it is a lot different. Yeah. So this one says, "What's for you will find you." And this one is one I worked on for a long time. I I don't know. I came at probably 12 or 13 drafts of this one to make it fit the way I wanted it to, and add all of the, embellishment parts of it. So sometimes it's just about, playing with it until you make it fit the way you want.
Wow, I think this takes so much patience. Like I don't think if somebody has a lot of patience, they can do it. So I want to touch upon that a little bit, Cortland. How
Yeah,
important is it to fail to get better? Like, does it happen that you do it once and it just clicks, or how does it work? How is that process? And what do you have to do?
almost. Yeah, almost never. I almost never get it right the first time. And sometimes it's, you know, this doesn't fit the way I wanted it to fit, um, or sometimes it's I moved my pen the wrong way and this isn't right, or it's not legible, or it could be anything, but I almost never get it right the first time. So it's it does take patience, and it does take a certain amount of, like, yeah, willingness to fail, to know you're gonna mess it up. Like, I haven't showed everything that I've showed you today has mistakes in it, like mistakes that I know that are there, but you probably won't see necessarily. Um, but that's when you're doing something by hand with pen and ink and a piece of paper, it's never going to look like it came out of, Photoshop. It's never going to look like that. You can try as hard as you want. It will never look that way. And so that's an important thing to remember too. If someone is paying me to do a design for them by hand, they know that it's never going to look like Photoshop. So that's an important thing to know when you're making anything, I think, by hand. You just got to go, you just got to be willing to try.
I love that. It's almost like you're making friends with progress rather than perfection, and
Yes,
that helps
always.
us keep going forward, because I think we get stuck in perfection so much that we never are able to make progress and we just quit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am, I am a perfectionist for sure. And sometimes when I look at these things, or I look at things that I made like a year ago, I'm like, oh no, no, like we can't leave that way. Like, we have to fix this. Like,
This photo on my Instagram.
I can't. Oh yeah, no. It's hard for me. Like, if I scroll too far back in my Instagram, I'll start wanting to like take this down. Like, you can't. But so I just don't look at them, honestly.
Because
But like sometimes it's important. Sometimes I'll make something and I'll know, like, this is good, but I don't love it, and it's because I've been looking at it for too long, and I just need to put it away and forget where those little imperfections are, so that the next time I look at it, I love it again.
yeah,
So, there's a fine line, but it's just a matter of, yeah, practice. You just have to practice and practice and practice and practice. And hand lettering is especially with calligraphy, it's one of those things. It's a little bit like learning a musical instrument, where if you practice every day, you're going to get better faster than if you practice once a month or once a week, or
correct.
it's more about the repetition of it than anything else.
So you've been also able to generate income out of this passion and hobby, right? Um, how
Yes.
how is that to have an income source from something that you really love? And is that something that was missing in the past? I don't know, in your life, and now that you have this as part of your income, how is that different? Having something that you love and generating income out of that, does it become stressful too? And do you stop loving it? How does that work?
It can. It can. It depends on the project, honestly. Um, it depends on, so sometimes what happens is I make these things for fun and then someone wants to buy them. And that obviously is great because I made this for fun, for practice, to see if I could, and someone loves it and wants to buy it. And so that's excellent. I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's people who say, "Hey, could you write? I this was my horoscope and I loved it. so much. I want you to hand letter it for me so I can hang it on my wall. Great. Or sometimes it's, even more specific. Wedding invitations or envelopes for your, I don't know, bachelor party or whatever it is. It just depends on the project, exactly where that kind of like, is this still fun comes into play. It depends on the client too. Some people give it to me and say, do whatever you want. I trust that you're going to make something beautiful. And I don't really care the specifics of what that is. Just do what you want. And sometimes they say that and don't mean it, but sometimes they do. So it, win some, lose some, I guess. I mean, anytime you're doing something for a job, I think it is different than doing something for fun or for your own passion. But most of the time, it's still fun. Most of the time, it's still fun.
That's awesome. And it still is fun, even though sometimes some stuff might come up, but it's not like now you're over it. It still is fun for you, right?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not over it. I'm definitely not over it. There are times when I'm over it. If I'm doing 200 wedding envelopes or wedding invitations, somewhere around 120, sometimes I'm over it. But it's just practice. I just try to look at it as every time I pick up that pen, I'm only getting better at what I'm doing. So
that's an amazing outlook.
It doesn't really matter what that practice is. Sometimes you just do it. So,
That's an amazing outlook to have. Cortlan,
yeah.
So in this world, you've been absorbed in this world. Like you said, you look at the world from these eyes, hand lettering, and you come across a lot of quotes and phrases and words. So, having been through so many quotes, phrases, and words, I particularly am a fan of like cool phrases and quotes as well. What's become one of your favorites? Because you've probably encountered way more than an average person out there, being in this world. What are some of your favorite quotes and phrases? What are they like?
My favorites. Well, wow, that is such a good question. I really like. So especially if I'm looking for something to letter, I tend to gravitate towards, I guess, shorter. So really concise, 3 to 5 words is great for lettering. So I look for things that I guess pack a punch in a small package. So I think or that have some specific imagery to them. Like cool as a cucumber is a phrase that we use all the time, but it has a pretty specific image that comes with it. Or like, the one that I showed you that the day will be what you make it has really specific imagery. It's a little longer than I normally would choose, but that one I just like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I know what I want this to look like. I know exactly what I want this to feel like when you read it. And so I don't know if I could give you a specific quote. I would just tell you that like there are things that I come across that resonate. And I think that we as individuals know when we have found a thing that resonates. And that's how I pick them out, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, that does. Yeah. And I bet since you've been across so many, it's tough to pick a favorite,
Yeah, I could. I don't even know if I could.
You go to the ice cream store and there's like 5 flavors. It's easy to pick with one favorite. But when you go in and there's like 1,000 flavors, you don't even know which one to pick to eat. Forget a favorite.
Yeah. And for me, usually it's, I do pick things that are pretty simple. And that's maybe just my personal style. I don't like trying to sift through a lot of complex, just say what you mean is what usually works for me.
I know
but
you have a very direct sort of communication style.
Yeah. Say what you mean. So that's usually for me what I'm, what I find what I pull out sort of the huge array of possibilities. But yeah, just trying to do justice to what the words are, I guess.
Awesome. So one of the final things that I want to touch upon, this is kind of I'm gonna throw a challenge at you. Not a challenge, but
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm gonna throw a phrase at you, and I want to see how you would think about and go about maybe coming up with an imagery while you're writing this phrase down. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. The phrase is, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas."
Okay.
So how would you think about it? What would you throw on there? I'm going to stay silent, so I'm going to let you concentrate.
Sure. So, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So there are a couple things about that phrase right away that are important. If I were going to hand letter this phrase, that would be important. One, it's repetitive. So you're going to hand letter the word Vegas twice. So you have to decide which one is more important, the first Vegas or the second Vegas. I would choose the second Vegas. So that's the one that I would want to put emphasis on. Stays in Vegas. So they're basically, when I look at or hear, in this case, the quote, I think about emphasis. And what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We're going to emphasize happens, stays, Vegas, because that's ultimately the message that we want to convey. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, it's about pulling those things out. Those are the things that I would make bigger or bolder or more colorful or whatever, ultimately in the design. I also, when I think of Vegas, I think of a couple different kinds of imagery. The lights, Vegas is lit up. So I would try to find a way, in particular for the word Vegas, to make that a little more reminiscent of like a sign with the lights and the, neon is hard to do with a pen and ink. You can definitely do it if you're going to letter it digitally. You can make it literally neon. Just depends on your style, on your, I guess, method in that instance. But also Vegas is it's in the middle of nowhere. It's like in the desert in the middle of nowhere. And so I would want to put that kind of desert in there a little bit somehow, either with, drawing, like putting some cacti in there or whatever. Probably I would make it a night sky, because I know we're going to want Vegas lit up like a sign. So these are just things that I would be thinking, like as I sort of orient that page, I would probably want maybe like the moon and stars to fill in the top. Yeah, I kind of imagine it a little bit stacked in my mind. So like and then happens would be bigger. In Vegas, small, because again, we're not going to emphasize that first Vegas. And then stays would be larger and then Vegas at the bottom. And kind of, stacked up like that. It's hard to describe without actually drawing.
I thought you did so well. Like I could almost sense the imagery, the kind of stuff you were saying, and I started forming an image in my head. That was so cool, Cortlan. You did like you hit it out of the park. The ball I threw at you, you hit it out of the park. Thank you.
That was a good example. That was a good quote to pick for a test. So many options.
Yes, I thought it would be fun. Cortlan, thanks for being on the show and showing me writing, calligraphy, hand lettering from a whole different point of view. This is a whole different world, and I'm glad I got a little more of a insight and magnifying glass view into your world of creativity. Are there any final things that you would like to say, or any questions you have for me?
Well, thank you so much for letting me talk about this. It is a kind of its own world, I guess. I've been in it for so long. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of people out there now, doing this kind of work. But I would really the only thing I would say is that anybody who is interested in trying it should try it. It is hard to learn, or it can be hard to learn, but it is also, you know, an interesting skill that you can apply to really anything. And people love it. People, if you present someone with a card with their name, you know, hand lettered on it, they love it. I think sometimes because everything is digital now, right? We're doing this interview with the magic of Zoom, but getting something in the mail that is by hand and interesting or pretty to look at, people love it. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to be a professional calligrapher to make something that people will notice or love. So I would say if you're interested in trying it, try it. And there are, I can't, hundreds of free resources all over the internet that will teach you to do it with just a pencil. You don't need anything fancy to start with. So it's possible for anyone, is what I would say.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Cortlan, for encouraging us, and also telling us like how we can be a little more personal and have a personal touch in our communication when we send people letters. That was awesome. Cortlan, thanks so much for taking the time out once again. I appreciate you being on the show, and all the art, everything you shared is so insightful.
Thank you, Naren. I hope you have a great day or evening.
Evening, yeah. Thank you.